All right, so here is the start to your project. So we're working into shape and we're looking at how we can incorporate shapes inside of this tube. You can see normally it's a brown tube. You are going to be painting it, and this paint right now, I really want to explain, it's really important that you understand this paint you want to be solid white. You want it to be nice and crisp and clean. You see a lot of streaks of the cardboard through here. This only has one coat. You're going to want to use a couple of coats of paint. I happen to use this paint right here called Chromacryl. I really like it, but another warning for you, this isn't an acrylic paint. It's got a very nice heaviness to it, so it covers very well. You don't have to use 25 coats to get it to cover. It is really important, though, that you try not to get paint on your clothing or your belongings. It is much more difficult for that paint to get off of those things, though I find Chromacryl, if you get a little bit of soap on it right away and you scrub it, generally it comes right out. If you let it dry, though, that's where you're going to have a problem. So I really do try to buy this. It's a great brand. But again, try to keep it off of your clothing and belongings so that it will not cause any staining, okay? So you will be taking that and you're going to be painting 2 coats. My recommendation is to hold it and to actually take, and I'll have some larger paint brushes out, but go ahead and paint the entire inside. You can stand over the blower and you can actually put it over the top. Don't set it down because it'll make stains. Let that dry and then put a second coat. It's really important that you understand the coats must dry in between. If you don't let them dry, you end up with basically just painting over the same exact coat of paint you've already put down. So you're going to be painting that. Then once the inside's dry, you can actually put your hand inside the tube and you can paint the outside of it. Again, 2 coats, let it dry. My suggestion is to get your name with a pencil. After you've got that second coat, I would get your name placed very small on one of the sides. Believe me, if you paint your tube and you spend the time making it look nice, you are going to want your tube back, not someone else's tube who maybe didn't spend as long as you did, okay? So I would take a pencil, just write your name very small. I emphasize very small because it's going to identify your work, but you don't want it to take up the whole side of the tube, okay? So that's really what you're looking at. And in talking about your shapes yesterday, you had a lot of options in terms of how you laid out your shapes, but I want to show you what generally you're looking for. Let me get this paper is kind of curly. What you're looking for before you start transferring onto your cardstock. This is what you need. Absorb it for a minute. What you need is some kind of a partial circle to hold something up. This something happens to be the side of a fireplace. Okay, one of my favorite memories, I decided to talk about the holidays. Okay, so if you'll notice, this fits on the inside right there. That's how I measured. I had this all drawn out, and then I drew on the inside and I added my fireplace. And notice my fireplace is kind of off center. This is the center right here. You'll see I put the fireplace off to the right. And that's because if you look over here, the Christmas tree is just a little tiny bit off center. And if I put the fireplace behind it, it would have completely blocked it. You wouldn't have been able to see it. So I made it so that it went here so that when we do the layering, we are going to get a chance to do the layering. Well, get a chance, I'm sorry, to see all of it. And then I decided, and I'm going to try it. It may not work as well as I wanted to, but I'm going to try it. I actually did the front layer as a window so that it's sort of like you're kind of looking in and you get to see the scene on the inside, okay? So the importance of having those circles, those partial circles, and you'll notice I've got 3 different layers on mine. That is a good quality piece with 3+ layers. 2 layers is okay. 1 layer is not, it's not pushing yourself quite enough. If you only have one thing in here, very similar to my letters, it's very single dimension. It doesn't have a lot of depth to it. And I remind you that depth, we've got foreground, we've got things in the middle. I'll show you on the side of the tube. Foreground would be things closer to us. Middle ground would be somewhere in the middle. And then in my background would be things towards the back. And I'm looking for you to build depth while using those 3 terms, okay? So when we're looking at adding these pieces in, again, right here, this would be transferred onto the cardstock. You would show me these drawings. Show me that you've understood that you have to add some kind of grounding to them to make sure that they sit properly. And then I will give you your cardstock. So as soon as that's sketched out, beautiful and ready to go, you're ready to go. I should see, again, for that 3 layers, I should see 3 separate pieces like this, not all traced onto one circle, because it won't function like that, okay? So, as we're ready to go, I do want to show you the importance of adding this ground line in. I actually have 2 of the same exact thing, okay? This one has the ground line, and this one doesn't. This one just has a little strip of paper. Notice that this would sort of float there, which is okay. For some of you, this will be actually a look you're looking for. However, if I've got something like this, this is my fireplace. If I've got this fireplace, let me put some black paper underneath. There we go. If I've got this fireplace, I'm going to have this sort of floating in here. I think you can kind of see that a little bit. How would this, then it would have to go on the bottom somewhere, and then it would look all wonky. If you're looking at why is that sunk into the bottom, what is that? Because our brain doesn't read it correctly. So again, you want to make sure that you're planning properly. If I have, this is my background. It's a little bright. Let me see if I turn off the light, if that will help. There we go, that's a little bit better. I've got that as my background. And then I start to move. Maybe the white paper was better. Let's put it back to white. It's not so washed out. Sorry about that camera work. Okay. And then I come in with the family. This would be in my middle. So I would want to put this somewhere in the middle ground, into here. And then at the front, then I would have my window. Okay. And then when I get those shadows, I'm able to have that stuff really show up a lot better. On camera with a white on white piece, it is very, very difficult to see it. So just kind of bear with me. I'll have these pieces live in class for you to actually see and take a look at. So again, here's that window without that circle background. How would I put that in there? This one, I might be able to get the corners, but then the top is floating free. So I really have to think about how I'm going to do this if I'm not including that circle around the edge of it, okay? Or part of a circle, okay? So that's really what we're looking at there. These are the drawings that you should have. After these are done, you should transfer those onto your cardstock. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to start putting your whole tube together. But as you're cutting, there's a couple of things that I want to go over. I did promise you that we would have a little bit of information about X-Acto knives. It's really important that you understand this is an X-Acto knife, okay? They are very, very helpful tools, but just like any knife, they can be very dangerous. So it is really important that, first of all, when you open it, you never want to open it like this because the blade will slip out and potentially cut you. So you want to make sure that you have both hands on it and then you pull it apart. Let me get closer here. All right, so this right here, this is the part of the blade that actually cuts. I have a lot of people that only use the very tip of it. Like it'll be very, very much on the point as they're cutting, and they're almost just like dragging it through the paper and tearing the paper. So again, you want to work very carefully. And I'm going to cut at an angle so you can see it on camera. But as I'm cutting, let's make sure we get the right angle. There we go. I hope you can see my angle. This is the angle that your cutting blade should be to the table. It is always pulled in the direction of the cut, just like you would use a knife at home, okay? Now to go back to the table, here's my hand, okay? It is really important that you never cut, and I'm actually gonna put the cap on to do this. Never cut toward your hand. You can actually have it slip very easily through the paper, okay? So that's number one, never cut towards yourself, okay? Now, I could hold the paper here and drag it in this direction. That would be perfectly fine, but never cut toward your hand, all right? Next thing, When you do get your X-Acto blade, it should have some kind of covering, which is expected to be returned every single time. This covering must stay on it as you travel anywhere in the classroom or when you put it down on your table. These are perfectly round, so they roll. This cover is actually, you can see it's kind of flattened, so it stops it from rolling as easily. So you want to make sure that cover is on it at all times, okay? There is never any fooling around, even teasing with X-Acto blades. I don't care if you're the best of friends or the worst of enemies. There is no threatening of anyone, whether it be just to have fun or in seriousness. That is absolutely imperative. If you would like a referral, that's what's going to happen if you do that, whether you're teasing or not. There is no I would say self-harm or any games that could harm yourself. You know, I talked about it yesterday, that little knife bit. I don't know what it's called, but you know, doing that with no, please don't do that. That is not safe. I don't care that you're doing it to you. I care too much about you to let you injure yourself, okay? Also, it is really important that you have an ID. Every time you borrow these X-Acto blades, you will need to give me an ID. If you don't have an ID, you're going to need to make sure you get one. I think they've still been doing it at lunch times. Please make sure you get an ID. If that's a problem, please come see me. I need to know, and I need to have that stuff with you. So I want to make sure that we get going, okay? So with that, you will also have a piece of cardboard. I will have cutting mats available. I will repeat this. I will have cutting mats available. Every single one of you that gets an X-Acto blade must get a cutting mat. There are pieces of mat board that you put under your desk, under your table, under your drawings. Then you do your cutting. So this is my mat board. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start to cut this piece out. I'm going to show you a couple of samples. First of all, do the tiniest, most delicate things first. Everyone tends to do like this whole outline bit. They'll come in here and they'll do the outline. I say don't. You do the outline, then you try to cut the little bits. If I cut this whole thing, then I try to cut out these little pieces, I would probably end up tearing my person off. Then I would get really frustrated. So first things first, you're going to come in there. Notice I'm going to turn my paper to keep me cutting properly. If it didn't cut through, I cut again. If you notice that your blade is dull, it's not cutting through properly, cap it, bring it to my attention, and then we will potentially change the blade. It does depend. For some cases, it just may be that you were cutting upside down. In other cases, it is a dull blade, okay? Now, if ever you cut yourself, this is very, very important. I do understand that cuts do happen no matter how careful you are. If you do cut yourself, I ask that you let me know so that you can go ahead and get it washed up, cleaned properly, sent to the nurse as needed. I've got plenty of Band-Aids and the nurse is well acquainted with taking care of people. So please make sure that you let me know. I won't automatically assume because you cut yourself that you were fooling around. Please don't think that, okay? A lot is in your demeanor. If I see you fooling around and then you cut yourself, I can put 2 and 2 together. Now, I use universal precautions. I will not touch your hand if you have blood on it. If there is blood on your blade, if you cut yourself, whether there's blood or not, I change the blade. No matter who you are, I do that for everyone's safety, because I'm not going to necessarily say, oh, you're the one that I need to make sure to change that blade. No, okay? So I want to make sure that you guys know that those are universal precautions that I use when you cut yourself. We do need to use gloves. We do need to make sure that you guys are sent for proper medical care if needed. And then from there, I change the blades. There is no blade that will be reused after it cuts someone. So definitely make sure that you let me know. We'll get that changed. Blades never go in the garbage, so please do not change the blade yourself. If your blade happens to fall out, which it occasionally does, let me show you how to change that. Right here, if you look at this, this is a, it's called the grip. This has some texture so that your hand doesn't slip off the X-Acto blade as you're trying to cut. And what you do is you hold the X-Acto blade on the smooth portion on the handle, and then you dial that, and that's how the blade gets released. Please do not release the blade and bring it up to me for a new one. It should be capped, brought up for me to check, and then we'll decide if it needs a new one, okay? But if yours feels loose and wobbly, you can see this happens to have the little line. Oh, it's a little hard to see. Let me raise the camera. It's not focusing too well. This has a little line right there that the blade fits into. Sometimes it's like a crosshair. You loosen it. I'm going to go ahead and loosen it. You place the blade in. Make sure it's all the way down, and then you tighten it. And you really want to give it a good tighten. You're going to go ahead and cap that up. That's how it goes down onto your desk. End of the period, we'll make sure we have enough time to check them back in. You need to make sure that every single one is checked back in. No X-Acto blade can ever leave this classroom. If you have an X-Acto blade on your person, it is considered to be a weapon, and I do not want you to get in trouble for that. So double check that you are always sure to turn it in. Also, if you have one at home, please keep it at home. Do not bring it with you so that you can use yours here. You're going to have to wait and use that one at home. Do not carry it on your person at all. Use it at home, okay? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video and get it uploaded. You are going to go ahead and get started with finishing out your sketches. I remind you, minimum of 3 levels for a nice high quality grade, showing background, middle ground, and foreground. Potentially more than that, okay? You don't need to stop at just 3. If you have 5 layers to add in, please do. That's not a problem. And with that, happy drawing.